Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Door to Door. I'm Virginia Stanley, Library Marketing Director at HarperCollins. I'm joined by my colleagues, Christopher Connolly and Lainey Mays. And we are so excited to have two juggernaut authors with us today. If you're a fan of historical fiction or romance, you're in the right place because we have with us today best-selling authors Kate Quinn and Beverly Jenkins. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so excited to have you both here.
Well, thank you for the invite.
Yeah, it's really such a treat to be allowed to talk to all the librarians today, and I really am thanking you guys for all tuning in and listening to us burble, or at least listening to me burble. Bev is going to be, erudite and well informed, and I'm just going to fangirl.
I don't know, girl.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think you're both pretty amazing. And and oh my goodness, when we posted this, the response from librarians has just been overwhelming. They are so excited to listen to you talk about your books. And so very quickly, so your books are going on sale a month apart. Kate's book, The Rose Code, that's going on sale in March of 2021, and Bev Jenkins' books, Wild Rain, which is the second installment in The Women Who Dare, goes on sale. I believe it's January. Is that right?
February 9th.
February 9th, 2 months,
Yep.
1 month apart.
Yep. February.
I can count. So we're looking forward to drilling down a little bit with each of you about these books, which, as we were saying before, all of your books are also entertaining and compelling and page turning, but you also learn so much, and there's so much to learn in both of these books. So we're going to get right to it. We're going to start first with Bev, and we're going to put Kate in the virtual green room. I don't know what you're going to do there, but have fun.
Yeah.
So before we say goodbye to both of you together, any messages, anything you want to say, speak now.
I just want to thank every librarian in the country because you guys are my absolute favorite people. And thanks for showing up. I know you got better things to do than be hanging out with us, but we love having you on our side. So thank you.
Librarians are book dragons, and they are the ones who promote books and literacy and love of reading all over the world. And I would not have a job without you ladies. My mother was a librarian, and I ran around libraries my whole life growing up, and I love all of you. So thank you again for tuning in.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm sure that they are as grateful to you as we are for taking the time to do this today. And believe me, we all have nothing better to do than to sit and talk to both of you. So with that, we will say adieu to Kate for
Bye,
minute
Kate.
3. And then and we'll talk to Bev, and then Kate, just relax, and we'll be back in a little while, okay?
All right.
Okay. Hi, Bev.
Hello there. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing well with snow here in the mitten, but we're used to it. It's not like, we don't know what to do or don't have long johns or boots. So we're good.
Yeah. Well, speaking of snow, your book starts out in a snowstorm.
Yes, it does.
Big snowstorm.
Big snowstorm.
It's
In
very
April.
evocative.
Yeah, in April, which is what we get up here in the Great White North sometimes is, snow and inopportune times. We think spring's here and winter knocks on the door and says, hello, I'm
Yeah.
here. Yeah, she finds him in a snowstorm.
I love that. It's you can feel it. You are very much there in that snowstorm when she finds him. But we'll back up for a second. I just want to sort of, draw the lines, and then you can fill in the colors here with this paint by number of a book that's just amazing. So this is your Women Who Dare series. So you have so many books in your vast library, and the first in this new series, the Women Who Dare series, the first one was Rebel.
Right.
Received tremendous acclaim, and hello for that jacket.
Oh, you know what?
Let's talk.
He's pretty easy on the eyes. His name is Travis Cure, and he was the starring guy in a small independent film that was done of my books called Deadly Sexy.
Yes.
And you can get that on or see it on Amazon.
Uh,
Author Iris Bowling, who's also a great suspense romance author, has a small independent film company. And he played my hero, just a nice guy. And I asked him, would you like to be on the cover of the book? And he was like, sure. So he had never done a cover before.
oh, you're kidding.
No, he'd never done. And Angel, who is the young lady who's the female on the cover, just sort of, helped him, go through the motions and know what to do. And, she's been a blessing in my life because she's on a couple covers too. But
That's lovely.
it's a lovely cover, lovely
Yeah.
cover.
And you can feast your eyes on that lovely man on the video on your website, which
Yeah.
I did, because you can see the trailer. And holy guacamole, my computer started smoking.
Yeah, he's a twin.
He is?
Yeah, he's a twin.
Wow.
I met his
Beautiful.
mom. Didn't meet the twin, but I think she has 5 boys.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I encourage everybody to go to Bev's site because it is chock full of information about all of her books, again, as I said, which are many, and some wonderful videos of Bev talking about, how you write and what you write and why you write. And it's really wonderful, Bev. It's a great site.
Yeah.
And so this was the first in your new series, and that was I loved, the school teacher
Mhm.
set in
Set
right
New
after
Orleans.
the
Yeah,
Civil
set
War.
New
New Orleans.
Orleans.
Yeah.
It's the fourth, I think it's the fourth Levesque book. Started with I wrote them out of order. In one book, I was, just really, really screwed up the timeline trying to be, I was a little bit too clever for my own good. And I'm getting letters from the readers going, Miss Beth, what is this? I'm like, I am so sorry. I will never do that again. But my readers love the family. There are 5 boys and a single mom, and she lost her husband, who was a ship guy in a storm. But it gives you the history of Reconstruction, gives you the history of New Orleans, and the Freedmen Bureau. And I like to put my stories where African Americans actually walked. And I like for them to carry the history through the characters. So I call it edutainment, entertainment and education. So you'll get a bib list in the back of the books. I know many of you librarians already know that. I worked in research library for many years for Michigan State University. So doing the research is very, very easy for me. And I list my sources so that my readers don't have to wonder how they can find more information. In my early days, I think I have 41 books.
I was trying to add them up and I wasn't sure.
I think there's 41 books. The readers, I keep the readers with me because they can answer questions like this. If I'm in the lecture, I'm like, okay, I don't know the answer. Somebody in the crowd does, and they usually do. But I think there's 41 books and 8 novellas.
Beautiful. Well, this book, Rebel, and then we'll move on to the new book that's coming out. But this got this wonderful reviews. You had starred reviews from L.J. Kirkus and Book Page. I love this quote from Library Journal that says, post-Civil War New Orleans comes to violent life in the hands of a veteran writer and delivers a vibrant, instructive, totally romantic historical tale that will resonate with many readers today. Beautifully done.
Yeah. I've been blessed to have great reviews with my work. I'm always very, very humbled by that. Because they could be reading other stuff, reading my books. So, that's an amazing thing.
Wow.
So yeah, I love what I do. I love being a romance writer. I love, going around the country talking about romance and African American history and, writing and, all of the pieces that go into what I do.
Yeah.
Living.
Yeah. Can you talk about, so now your new book, Wild Rain, this is the second one in the Women Who Dare series, and going on sale in February. already receiving terrific reviews. And I'm wondering if you could give us a little bit information on this book. Where does this one take us?
This one takes us to Wyoming. It is as you said, the second in the Women Who Dare series. Excuse me. A little tickle here. The Women Who Dare series. It's set in the world that began with Forbidden, which was started in Arizona Territory. So that series was called the Old West series. And you had Forbidden, Breathless, and then Tempest. So the woman in Tempest comes to Wyoming as a mail order bride. And my heroine in Wild Rain is her sister-in-law. When the book came out, I must have received a gazillion emails telling me they wanted Rain's, her name is Spring Rain, the heroine in our book. They wanted her to have her own story. A lot of times the readers will generate stories. And sometimes you just have to say, okay, all 5 of these guys in this book are already married. So I can't write, their stories. Romance readers are so voracious and so supportive and so wonderful. So Rain is, she's had a complicated life. She's a rancher, a bit of trauma, well, a lot of trauma. When her grandfather decided that he wanted to marry her off to somebody as old as he was, and she was just not having it. So she wound up in a situation that would affect her for the rest of her life. And she's a pretty badass lady. She's very, very blunt. She's very, very protective of herself. And our hero is Garrett McCrae, and he is a reporter. He's also a carpenter. He's a man of many, many talents. And through him, I get to tell the history of the, I think it was 19,000. I got it written down. The 19,000 African-American sailors who served in the United States Navy. He also represents the African-American newspapers because he's there as a reporter to do a piece on Spring's brother, who was a doctor in Wyoming. So he represents that. I mean, there were hundreds of African-American newspapers in the 19th century. He represents a small paper that his dad runs. They're known as sundown papers because usually the editors had day jobs and they would write on their newspapers after the sun went down, after they got home from their day jobs. So he represents that. I mean, the first African-American newspaper was 1827, Freedom's Journal out of Philadelphia. So he represents a lot of different things. I mean, I enjoy doing that because that way you can tell the history in ways that won't put your readers to sleep. If you have your characters wear that history, they are more inclined to learn stuff. So, and he's also he's also an avid reader. Every time you see him, he's got a book in his hand. I think he's the first, what we call in romance, my first cinnamon roll hero. You have what we call alpha holes, you have, beta types, you have alpha types, and then you have these cinnamon rolls, these guys that are just so wonderful and just so sweet and so caring and all about the heroine and making her, day better, life better. So he lacks the swagger of say a Levesque or my outlaw Julys. He's just a good guy. So, and she is just like, he's just so fascinated by her. He just doesn't know what to do. I mean, he's like, who is this woman? I mean, she's got on pants. She's got she got a gun belt. He's like, women in DC did not, because he's originally from DC. He said, no, this is not like anything like the women I'm accustomed to. And he finds her fascinating. And like I said, it was a great story to compose and to do the history in and bring those two together.
Yeah, she is fascinating because she's you know, she doesn't need him, and she doesn't even think she needs a guy. And
Mm-mm.
then along comes a spider.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about the that time in history,
Yeah.
in that place, and what was going on with women's rights?
Wyoming was the first state to allow women to vote in 1869. They passed that law hoping that by giving women the right to vote, it would bring more women to the territory, because it was still a territory back then. Bring a bunch of women out, you know, from out east to west to sort of civilize the place, because you know when women show up, you wind up with libraries and dress shops and churches and schools, um, as opposed to just a bunch of trappers and miners and, you know, the guys who quote unquote settled the West. So they gave women the right to vote. It did not necessarily bring the amount of women that they wanted. I mean, they got a few, but they didn't get a whole lot. But it did change the territory. And women of color were allowed to vote. Um, Native American women were not allowed to vote, but African American women were allowed to vote. I touch a little bit on the Native American, the plight of the tribes back then. You know, I like bringing up the history that we may not have learned in school. I mean, we probably did not learn in school. Um, very few people know about the Sand Creek Massacre with the Cheyenne in Colorado Territory. Um, when the civil, and that happened in 1864, when the United States was at war, they brought a lot of the troops that had been out west, they brought them back east to fight in the war. So patrolling and quote unquote keeping the natives in their place was taken over by a bunch of local cavalries and local militias. And these locals in the Colorado Territory wound up massacring a village full of women and children, even though Black Kettle, the chief, had already signed a peace treaty. But you know, one thing you know, if you do the history, you know that United States never made a treaty that they didn't break. So these people were massacred, and it sent the Cheyenne on a warpath. They of course lost that battle, and probably one of the last battles in the war, and they wound up going onto the reservation like many of the other tribes had been subjected to. So talk a little bit about that. I talk a little bit about the Chinese who were doing the mining. We see Spring's brother riding out to deal with a measles epidemic at one of the camps. So I love doing the history. I love doing the unsung heroes and heroines of American history that, like I said, we don't often hear about. But as I said, I love what I do. I really do.
Well, I have to tell you, Bev, it's so apparent in not only in the types of books that you've written, the quality of them, the breadth of them, but the fans who come to you. I mean, we have known each other, haven't seen each other in a bit. I think we talked about the Texas Library Association might have been the last time we saw each other.
Yeah.
Your library and is just so vast, and as I say, what did you call it before? Educational? No,
Edutainment.
Edutainment. I love that.
Entertainment and education. Yeah.
It's exactly what we're talking about. I mean, you really do learn so much, and with this series, this Women Who Dare series, yet again, I mean, I have to be honest, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
This book has already gotten, starred reviews from Kirkus and Booklist and PW. I'm going to read this PW quote real quick, and then we're going to run to some questions from folks. But this is what PW had to say here about Wild Rain. Memorable characters and fun, if fraught dialogue make the highly anticipated second book in romance star Jenkins' Women Who Dare series a refreshing and keenly innovative historical romance. Readers will be clamoring for more well-researched and inclusive love stories featuring strong women in the American West. It is a beautiful love story. It's completely, um, uh, it rings true on every level. I love her by herself, but I love her with him, you know,
Yeah.
and I love learning about that time, and that she could own land, and it's a really cool story. And of course, she has her scars. She's got, there's stuff going on there. There's always stuff going on, but it's just so beautifully done, and it's powerful.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. We have a little bit of time before we're going to switch over. Chris Laney, I'll turn it to you. Questions of your own or from our pals, librarian pals?
Yeah, but I just have to say, there's so much love in the comments, Bev. They're just an outpouring of love and appreciation.
Thank you.
For your
Edutainment.
books.
Yeah.
They love that. They look, yes. Let's see. Kate Quinn commented herself. She doesn't like the what do we call them? Alpha jerk?
Alpha holes. Yeah.
Alpha holes.
Yeah, we don't either.
Yeah. Let's see here. So questions. Let's see.
There's one from Maureen Roberts. It says, your novels have been set during so many different historical periods. Is there one time period you haven't set a story that you would like to? I'm sure there are plenty.
I'd love to do the 20s. When I first started, historical stopped at 1900. So now that we're in the 21st century, we can branch out a little bit more. I would love to do the gentleman gangsters of Harlem and Detroit and Chicago. Talk about swagger. And this was before drugs came into before the white moms brought the drugs into the communities. So I would really, really love to do that time period. I also would like to go back to the 18th century. I've only done one book on the American Revolution, so I'd like to go back and hit those people up again too. So fascinating history. There's so much out there for me to write about. When they close the casket, I'm gonna be banging on the door going, wait, I got more stories to tell. So yeah. Thanks for that question.
Yeah. What else we got? Lainey, you have a question? Miss Lainey Mays?
That's fine. I'm so intrigued by this historical research you do. And I was just wondering, because when I read it, I'm thinking, and it's probably the chicken and the egg situation, which probably both, but do you have something in mind when you're writing, like, maybe he'll write for a newspaper and then research it, or do you kind of see research and put it away as a nugget for later?
Well, it's like you said, it's chicken and the egg. I'm a pantser, so a lot of times I don't even know what we're doing. I'm just, sort of winging it. But if I do need to research, if I have a kernel of a story, I'll do, the basic research first. And I have to do less now than I did when I started. Shout out to the Ypsilanti County Public Library in Michigan, because your excellent African American community section, history section, was what I used to write my first book. So, I'll do a little bit of research because I've learned a lot more, and then see where the story takes me. Garrett wound up being, not only, like I said, a newspaper reporter to help out his dad, but he's also a carpenter. And then we said, oh, okay, I've done the U.S., colored troops. I've not done the Navy. So let's make him a Navy guy. And then I did the research for that section, history section. Yeah. That's what I used to write my first book. So yeah, I'm getting back feedback here. So yeah, I love the history. And if I'm writing something and something comes up, I will stop and go do the research and then come back to work. So yeah.
There's so many layers. It's so fun to peel back and learn. I learned so much coming back from reading.
Yeah. Romance writers make great Jeopardy contestants because we know so much, and a lot of it, winds up, you can't use everything, otherwise, put your readers to sleep. But yeah, we know a lot of quote unquote useless sort of information.
But I think even more to that, how to ask questions, which and for Jeopardy, that's number 2. But I think you ask questions and say, well, what if this happened here? I love that. Yeah.
Well, that's the basic premise of what we do is,
Yeah.
you know, the what if
Mm.
or the what who, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah.
Hey, Bev, we got a question here from Donna Wilder.
Hmm.
I read that when you were a baby, you would chew on your books and your mother would tell you, eat those words, baby.
Yeah. I told this story when I gave my speech at RWA for the Nora Roberts Award. Yeah, my mom read to me in the womb, which, you know, it was very, very novel in 1950. I just lost her in April. She was an avid reader up until, you know, she got sick. So she would buy me books. I'm the oldest of seven. So she'd buy me books, and of course I was too little to read, but I would chew on these little cloth pages, and she would say, and I didn't learn that story until, you know, maybe a few years ago. And she would say, eat those words, baby, eat those words, baby. So, you know, I tell her she was responsible because I had to do something with all the words that I had eaten when I was a little baby. So, but I got my, you know, I think I inherited my love of reading from her. Um, when she was born in 28. So when she was in in the 40s, when she was a teenager and all that, um, the libraries in Detroit were segregated, and she you could go to the library if you were Black, but they were not allowed to take the books home, so you couldn't borrow them. They had them shelved separately. They were behind the desk, but she wasn't, you know, as I said in the speech, she wasn't deterred by that. You know, she said she'd spend all afternoon, you know, just sitting in the library reading.
Hmm.
And basically, you know, the Black classics with, you know, Langston Hughes and, you know, that crew. And so when I started going to the library in probably 58 or 59, the libraries were no longer segregated. And she didn't care what we read. um, you know, I used the Mark Twain Library on the corner of Gresh and Burns on the east side of Detroit. And I read every book in that library, from the kiddie books to the young adult books to the adult books. And it is no more, the library. It was one of the places that was abandoned during the Detroit bankruptcy. And I saw a picture. The roof had caved in. The place was full of water. The books were all, and I
Well,
just cried when I saw that picture
yeah.
because of the, you know, the beautiful memories that I had of that place. But I would not be who I am without libraries. And as I told you guys yesterday, you know, the best gift, and I say this all over the country, the best gift you can give a kid is a library card. So, and they're free. So it's not
Well,
like you gotta go in debt
that's
to get one.
that's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, we salute you and your mother, you know, for you're your mother's daughter for sure. And
Yeah,
we're glad you ate those words, and
me too.
and we're glad for the words that you've given us and the stories and the lessons. You know, it's really wonderful. So I wish we could continue, but we're starting to
I'm
run out
getting into
of time.
Kate's time, so I'm,
Well,
I'm gonna back off, and I'm for all the librarians out there. I'm working on book 11, so let the readers know because I know they're like, when is she gonna write another book? It's gonna be a Christmas book.
yes,
So far, the title is called A Henry Adams Christmas. So they will get that not this year.
next
Year.
November we're thinking. I
Yeah,
don't
next November, somewhere around in there. So
know.
thank you to all the librarians everywhere, or as the kids say, all the librarians. You know, you are a joy and a blessing in my life. So, and thank you, Virginia, and your crew for all you do. Um, Amazing. It's amazing. So
Well,
I'm gonna
thank
back
you.
off and leaving and going to work. And you guys have fun with Kate.
Okay, and
And
thank you,
very,
Bev.
very welcome. Happy,
Wild Rain going on sale February 9th.
yeah,
Library,
pre-order.
pre-order Library Reads voting deadline
Yep.
January 1st. There's the book.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a magnificent read. You'll learn a lot, and you'll flip through these pages fast because it's delicious and
All right.
educational and informational and entertaining.
All of that other good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you,
listen, you
guys.
do well. And if there are any questions that we didn't get to, Bev, also one last thing, Bev will answer questions. You can go on to Facebook later and answer any questions we didn't get to. But also, if you have any, if you'd like to talk to Bev or have Bev do a virtual visit to your library, you can send us an email. You know how to get in touch with us, and we will forward it on to her publicist.
Sounds good. You
Okay.
guys take care. Stay well.
You too, Bev.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Bev.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. I'm
Yeet.
trying to leave.
That's all right.
Let me out.
Get me out.
Let me out.
Oh my God, I love her.
All right.
Okay, she found her way out. And now we let someone in. Kate Quinn. Hi, Kate.
Hello.
How are you?
Well, I don't want to talk at all about the Rose Code or anything else. I would just like to have her talk for the next half hour about this whole gentleman gangster idea, and I just want to listen to or talk about that. Ideally, at least for the next half hour.
I mean, the responses to that was crazy in the chat room. People were like, yes, 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 yourself included, Kate.
Well, I don't know how I'm going to follow that, but I will do my best.
Well, you'll be just fine, Kate Quinn. Kate Quinn, New York Times best-selling author of The Huntress and the Alice Network, both which were also library reads picks. And now you're here with the Rose Code, which goes on sale in March. This is a fascinating story that we were talking about before, and just there are your megawatt bestsellers, The Huntress, the Alice Network, amazing. Rose Code, like your other books, inspired by real events and people. This is exploring the secretive and fascinating world of Bletchley Park, where I have been virtually visiting. And I know more about Bletchley Park than ever before. But that was the home of Britain's code-breaking operation during World War II. And what you've done here is so fascinating by humanizing this with these three women who you've created who are called to Bletchley Park. I turn it over to you to tell folks what you want them to know about this book.
I like to flippantly call it The Crown Meets the Imitation Game. And because we all have to have, some sort of elevator pitch tagline. But it really is about this very critical and for a long time very unknown part of World War II history, where it was the code breaking that went on behind the scenes in absolute top secrecy in this country house, which was in the middle of nowhere in Buckinghamshire. And it was all about these folks, the best and brightest brains from Britain, who were recruited from all over Britain to come to this country house and to work on breaking the supposedly unbreakable Axis military codes, which were very appropriately called Enigma, and which was involved in tiny, sort of like handheld encryption machines where, battles, orders, and so forth would be scrambled so that they could be safely communicated via Morse code on the radio. And so you had all over Britain first listening stations where you have women listening to Morse code and writing it down. And then those go to Bletchley Park, where the code breakers would, with basically scraps of paper and pencil, break into these supposedly unbreakable codes. So they were literally reading Hitler's mail. You would have this place in the middle of nowhere where the average girl who worked there is better informed than Churchill. They knew when D-Day happened. They knew when Hitler had committed suicide. They knew all these things before anybody else in Britain knew, and no one ever knew what they knew. This could get confusing really quickly. But what it comes down to is this fantastically secret place, and this also fantastically kooky place, because you had a lot of non-typical folks here. And it was a very smart system where you had a lot of people who were maybe a little bit square pegs for round holes. And this was a place where they were allowed to be square pegs because the folks in charge knew that they were going to do the work as best they could if they were just left alone. So they were left alone. They did outstanding work. And it is estimated by some historians, at least, that thanks to the success of the Bletchley Park code breakers, many of whom were women, the Second World War was shortened by as much as 2 years, possibly, and therefore millions of lives saved. So that was really what, inspired me to want to write about this. It really did not start even becoming known until the 1970s, when some of the terms of the Official Secrets Act ran out. Because all these people, they did this amazing work throughout the war, and then they were told to go home and never talk about it. And they did not. They kept this huge secret. And it wasn't until, decades later that they were allowed to finally start talking. And when they did, you had this flood of memoirs, this flood of information, and I really found it all so incredibly fascinating. And I was just gobsmacked by the kind of work that these people did and the conditions under which they worked. So that is what inspired the Rose Code.
Oh, Virginia, I think you're muted.
You're muted.
Right. Can you talk about the three women at the core of the story? A little bit about them.
Well, I knew this book was going to be a multi-heroine, multi-viewpoint novel. And that's because I wanted to show as much of the process of code breaking at the park as possible. And that would mean more than one set of eyes, because the secrecy was so intense that you weren't even supposed to tell other people inside Bletchley Park what you worked on. So I have three women who all worked in very different parts of the park and all do very different work. And these women all come also from all different, walks of life. And that's very deliberate as well, because Bletchley Park really was a melting pot. You literally could find a Duke's daughter working side by side with a London secretarial pool graduate. And this was not at all unusual. So I wanted to find the kind of women who normally in the ordinary course of life would never have met. And yet, because they are all summoned to work at Bletchley Park, they meet, they become friends, and this is going to have, profound consequences, not just for them during the war, but on their lives after the war. So we have Osla, who is Canadian born, a debutante, an heiress, and a girl very much who has everything. And she is based on a real person, a real Canadian-born debutante who worked at Bletchley Park and who also happened to be Prince Philip's wartime girlfriend before he ever happened to fall in love with a certain Princess Elizabeth. So we have a girl who is dating a prince who has everything at her feet, yet she wants to prove herself. She has fluent German. She goes to the park to be a translator for enemy secrets. So she's the one who's literally taking the decrypted information and breaking it down from German into English. And then you have Mab, who is a tart-tongued, almost 6 foot tall, very a social climbing girl from East End in London who's determined to get herself and her little sister out of the kind of poverty she was born in. Her ticket to that is going to be a library card. She educates herself with a library card very proudly, and hopefully a gentlemanly husband. And where better than Bletchley Park with all its Cambridge and Oxford graduates to look for said gentlemanly husband while working at on the Bletchley Park decryption machines, like the bomb machine and the Enigma machine. So that's Mab, and she also joins in, and she and Osla become billet mates. And then you have Beth, who is a local village girl, a spinster, the kind of girl who is 24 years old. They still call her a girl, and she's living at home, and she's very much battened down by a repressive family. And she's looking forward to absolutely nothing in her life other than what she already has. But this woman has a gift, rather secretly, for puzzles and patterns. And she's going to become something very, very different from what her entire family ever imagined when she is recruited as one of the park's very few female cryptanalysts. So all three of these women meet and they become friends, and that, as I said, is going to have profound consequences for them and for the war.
And there's two storylines happening throughout this, which you do in your previous books as well. How do you write that out? Like, do you have a method that you follow for all of your books as far as, do you focus on one storyline? Do you write them concurrently? How does that work?
Well, for both the Huntress and the Alice Network, I wrote both storylines cutting back and forth between them because I made it easier to tease out the parallels between the two timelines. And that worked very well for both of those. For the Rose Code, I wrote all the wartime stuff first. And mainly I did that because I wasn't entirely sure what was going to happen in the other storyline, which takes place in 1947, just about 2 weeks before the royal wedding between Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip. And I wasn't entirely sure what happened there. So I said, well, I'll write all the wartime stuff first and I'll intercut the other stuff later. And I made a big headache for myself doing it that way. And I don't think I want to do it that way again. I think this is the lesson to learn here is try to figure out at least what your other timeline is going to be about, boys and girls, because other than that, you will write all the wartime stuff and you'll be like, I still don't know. So I had to take some time and figure that out. And that was a big headache, but you know, it's done now, thank goodness. And I don't have to fiddle with it anymore.
Let's see here.
We have some photos. I don't know if we do we want
Ooh,
to show
good point.
those. So here, Kate was so gracious to send these to us.
Yeah, Kate, do you want to talk maybe a little bit about the research and your own trip?
Yeah, this is Bletchley Park. It was a country house in Buckinghamshire. It has been preserved as a historical site and a visitor site, which I spent a lovely 4 or 5 days at, you know, in an absolute geek out of, awe at everything. This is the house itself. It's surrounded by all these little green prefabricated huts where a lot of the code breaking was done. The house was something that the actual Bletchley Park workers tended to think they thought it was hideous. I think it's kind of beautiful, but they called it, the architectural style was lavatory Gothic or, Tudor Bethan monstrosity. There were a lot of creative terms for the park itself and what they thought it looked like. I do think it's kind of lovely, but it's been preserved now as a historic site, and you can walk into those little green huts. You can walk into that mansion and look at the rooms there, and they are mocked up to look the way they would have looked in the 40s. So you can walk into a room and see a period typewriter and a period brand of cigarettes sitting on the table in a box, and a period hat and coat hanging on the hat rack. And it all has the look like Alan Turing himself just walked out of the room and he's going to walk back in at any moment. And it's a wonderful place to see. So when, quarantine if it ever finally lifts and you get a chance to go to the UK, this is absolutely worth going.
Were there other photos? Was there a few others? We could look at them. Oh, that's cool.
Now that's the actual Enigma machine. They're little compact encryption devices. The idea was that they could be packaged up very quickly and taken out used on the front lines to scramble battle orders. That's my hand on the Enigma machine. I was at the park in a demonstration of how they worked, and again, geeking out so I could hardly speak. But the idea being is that I'm not going to try to have an explanation of how the Enigma machine works, but the idea is you can type a message in and it will come out so scrambled, so impenetrably that no one will be able to decrypt it unless they have the correct key. And that is supposed to be impenetrable. It wasn't, and Bletchley Park proved that because they were, by the end, reading the mail on a daily basis, and the Germans never knew.
I think we have one more photo to share.
Yeah, this is what is called a bomb machine, BOMBE. And it was originally, the British bomb machine was designed by Alan Turing, and there were some, some other improvements that were made by other cryptanalysts at the park. But it was essentially a great big computing machine that was designed to help speed up the code breaking process. And basically by eliminating some millions and millions of mathematical possibilities, so it was faster to narrow down on what the actual key would be. And these machines were operated by women from the Royal Naval Service who were recruited to come and operate these machines, which were in a tiny hut. The machines are loud, they are rackety, they are smelly, dripping oil. You would get electrical shocks from from all the plugs and so forth. It was not a fun place to work during the war, but it was definitely critical. One of my heroines, the one named Mab from London, actually does work on one of these machines. She's not in the naval service, but one of the things was these machines are large. They're about 8 feet tall. You had to have tall women operate them because only taller women, I think they had the limit at about 5'8", were able to reach the drums at the very top, which would have to be pulled out and cleaned and then put back in. And Mab is about 5'11" in flats, so she is recruited one day to fill in when they need one more set of hands, just simply because she's the tallest girl in the room. So the bomb machines are kind of like an iconic instrumental thing that we imagine from Bletchley Park. And if you actually look at my cover, that is a bomb machine that you see in the background. It's obviously they're not that beautiful wash of sunlight gold. that is on my cover, but the drums that you see are very much, that's a bomb machine in the background. And I was very pleased that that was a vintage photograph that was used. So that is very much a one of my heroines looking at a bomb machine, and you can just imagine all those drums turning over and circling and making this loud rackety sound and probably driving you crazy.
So wild. We have questions. Chris, Laney, you want to get to some of our librarian pals' questions?
Yeah, sure. So, and I thought this was really interesting earlier when we were talking, Kate, about how recruiting worked and how people came to be involved with the project. And then Janet Lockhart, just to add on to that, asks, how did social class affect the dynamics of Bletchley Park?
Well, the way that the recruiting was done really was, at first, it was before war had even been declared, you had a handful of cryptanalysts and intelligence people who were recruited from a lot of mathematical groups in mathematical tutorial sessions from Cambridge and Oxford. And then the thing is that since this was so top secret, and because as they were getting started on Enigma and on intelligence, they kept recruiting people they knew, because you had to have people who were trustworthy, which meant that you had to have someone to vouch for them. So they kept recruiting then these young men who would recruit from other people they knew from college, other people they knew from school. So that meant you had a certain class structure that was built in, with a lot of university graduates. And so that was definitely a class thing at first, but then they started branching out as they said, all right, we need more people to do the decoding, to do the filing, to do the administration. So they started pulling from women's colleges. And then they would start pulling from, well, we need somebody who's trustworthy to do this. So I know Lord so-and-so, he's got a couple of daughters. They need to do something during the war. Let's get them in there. We know they're trustworthy. And so, but then they did start pulling from other classes as well. And you did have actually what people mostly described as a remarkably egalitarian place, because you could literally find, as I said, a duke's daughter sitting next to a secretarial pool graduate. And the fact is, you both are on shift until 4 o'clock, and you both got to get the same amount of work done. So you had cross-class friendships popping up. You had all kinds of interesting, back and forth happen. And there was this very thriving social life at Bletchley Park, because people realized very soon that the stress of this kind of work, the mental stress, was huge. And if they didn't want their code breakers cracking up on a mass level, they needed to provide ways in which people could blow off steam. So you had dramatics clubs, you had chess clubs, Highland dancing. There was rounders played on the lawn in front of the park, people sunbathing, on the sides. You had all kinds of these things happening. And it did mean that, the park quite often resembled, people said, a kind of like a wacky university campus, more than it resembled, a top secret decryption facility. And that is because, and a lot of people did speak about, how they missed when they left the relaxed attitude that they found at the park, the acceptance level. You had, there was much less classism, I would say, on display, because of simply everybody was in this work together, and they had to rely on brains more than they relied on social classes. So the best code breaker we've got, then she's the one who, is going to be the one to work on the hardest stuff, not maybe the guy who actually graduated from Oxford over there, even if he is some of a higher social class. So you did have a kind of egalitarianism that came about that a lot of people spoke of wistfully, especially when they left the war. And a lot of the women said too that, it was a place where you could find a level of acceptance for women's voices and for their ideas in a way that they wouldn't find in other workplaces, at least not very regularly after the war. So I think it was that level of acceptance and, a little bit of that wackiness that also drew me to depicting the park, because it really did seem to be quite a wonderful place in a lot of ways.
An equalizer, an equalizer in some ways, even after.
It was brains that counted.
Yeah. And it kind of sounds like a college campus in some ways, getting a lot of fun and hard work in there together. Maureen Roberts asked, these women sound fascinating. Any elements of a romance in this one, and who would you cast to play them in the movie?
Ooh, that's fun. Yes, there are definitely a few romances in this. I have, let's see, for one of my pairings I already told you about, I have Osla, who would be, if I was having her be cast, I'd have Holiday Granger cast her. She's wonderful in The Borgias and also in the CB Strike series. She's the girl who all the guys want to date, but she's also the girl that all the girls want to be their best friend. She's that kind. And she's got a lot of fun about her. She'd be great. And since she was dating Prince Philip, I'm sorry, there is no one to play young Prince Philip but Matt Smith from The Crown. That is just end of discussion. So there we go there. For one of the other romances I have is, and I won't tell you who matches up with who, but for Mab, who's my tall Londoner who with street smarts, I would have someone with really impressive eyebrows and a really great resting bitch face to cover up the soft heart. Someone like Cara Delevingne would be great, or like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes era Jane Russell. And then for Beth, I'd say, well, I did just watch The Queen's Gambit, and I think Anya Taylor-Joy, who plays the very quirky chess genius Beth, she could play a very quirky cryptanalyst genius named Beth in this book perfectly easily. And for some of the other guys that do pop up, I've got a very quirky red-haired code breaker who is sort of like the best friend to all the girls, maybe a romantic figure at some point. I won't spoil that. Eddie Redmayne would do him very nicely, a red-headed quirky guy. And then I have an older man who's a war poet from the First World War, doesn't at all know if he has another war in him this time around. And he's very much based in sort of like the Wilfred Owen type. I think someone like Alan Leach, who was Branson in Downton Abbey, would be wonderful for him. And then also finally, I have a guy who works alongside Alan Turing on the German naval codes. And I based him on a real character, a real man from Bletchley Park. He's one of the few, non-pasty white guys you would find there. He came from a family of Egyptian, Arabic, and Maltese bankers and diplomats. University education, wealthy family. But he was one of the few people of color you will see mentioned in Bletchley Park. And I based a hero of mine off of a guy like him. And so I have this guy who came from this family of Middle Eastern diplomats and bankers and so forth. Was just a brilliant code breaker. And I think the guy who played Aladdin in the live action remake would be, I think, quite lovely in his role. So I think that would be a great movie. It would be a lot of fun.
I need to see this movie right now. That'd be a great cast.
I think you've given this some thought, Kate.
Well, I already had to ask, somebody asked me that before in like a Q&A that I did. So I had all of that right top of my head. And plus it's one of those things, I've heard a few writers say that, they don't ever envision a cast, and I kind of tend to call BS there because there's no way there's nothing better to procrastinate on your daily word count than to, be Googling pictures of Tom Hardy for the imaginary fantasy Netflix series and calling it work. So I really don't know very many authors who have not done this at some point.
Yeah. I love we just finished binging the Queen's Gambit too. And it's like, that's so perfect. It's so different, I would say.
You went on mute again.
I'm sorry, more questions. What do we have, guys?
Barbara Ringle asks, did you see the PBS series Bletchley Circle, and how close does it fit with the Rose Code, if you have seen it?
Yeah, I have seen the Bletchley Circle and I liked it very much. It's a little bit like that in the sense that my ladies are called together in the years after the war to solve a mystery. And theirs involves a spy, possibly, who was at Bletchley Park. And that is actually based on some real bits of history. There was a spy at Bletchley Park. And but the difference with the Bletchley Circle is that it mostly takes place in the post-war years. Whereas in the Rose Code, most of the book takes place during the war itself, as they are going through the war and the various code breaking challenges within it. And the post-war timeline is something that will, take over at the end of the book, but it's a lesser presence through the first part of the book because it was the wartime years I really wanted to show the majority of, because that's what really fascinated me. But I do love the Bletchley Circle, and it's a wonderful bit of, interest for not just about Bletchley Park, but about the women of Bletchley Park.
We were just talking before about the Bletchley Park website, and if anybody goes to that, it's pretty cool. Ironically, it's supposed to open up tomorrow again for visitors. I don't know if that's going to happen or not because it had closed because of the pandemic, but lots of really interesting information there as well. Kimberly McGee says, this isn't really a question, but I just I agree with this. She says she always learns so much about history from your books and so much about the strong women behind the scenes. And she can't wait to start this one. And I think we all feel that way. I mean, you really do such a wonderful job of portraying strong female characters. It's fantastic. I just wanted to make sure we read that out.
Oh, thank you very much.
Guys, more?
Yeah, I was just curious, speaking of spies, so at the time of Bletchley Park, what was the feeling? Was there a lot of paranoia surrounding that? I mean, it was such a wide breadth of people they're recruiting. What was the tone with the potential for spy work?
There was certainly paranoia because, you know, the first thing basically that people were told is they were ushered into Bletchley Park, you were read the rules, and then they said, like, all right, and by the way, you're signing the Official Secrets Act. You get to talk about this never, ever with anyone, or it's treason. And this could mean either prison, or it could mean, hey, maybe we just stand you up against a wall and shoot you. So this is the kind of thing that makes a big impression on people. And you actually had, you know, a certain level of paranoia with the workers themselves. They weren't allowed to talk within the park. They were certainly not allowed to talk to their families. They had, you know, you had people who were so paranoid about accidentally spilling information that, you know, like I would read stuff about like a woman who said, like, I wouldn't even go under anesthesia for a dental operation. You know, it's like I made them give me a local and do it that way because I was so worried that I might talk in my sleep under anesthesia. So that was the level to which people took it seriously. But at the same time, there was a certain amount of information trading that went on in the park. And that was where I think it's inevitable because you have so many people who have, you know, husbands, brothers, fathers, fiancés on the front lines. So you would have sometimes people, you know, if you worked in the naval section, another girl might come up and say, I got a fiance on this particular ship at the Gulf of Aden. Can you like keep an eye out and let me know if there's anything that comes up with that particular ship? And they say, yeah, sure, no problem. I got a brother in the Air Force and you work in the air section. So you let me know if anything pops up there. You know, so you'd have things like that happen, but that's very discreet. It's all within the park itself. And there was all these warnings, of course, you know, loose lips sink ships and, you know, things like that. You know, you never were supposed to talk about things outside the park at all. And there was even a particularly bitter component, especially for the men who worked at the park, because if the ladies, it's not so bad. It's assumed, well, you're doing secretarial work. You make it sound boring. The more boring, the better. But the men would sometimes, or quite often actually, be targeted by people who would, you know, come up to them, or even their own family members saying, why aren't you in uniform? You know, young men like you, why aren't you fighting? And they could not defend themselves. All they could do is just say, I'm doing work, you know, and it's like, yeah, but you're not on the front line. What are you doing not fighting? And so you had a lot of the Bletchley Park men who had a lot of shame about that because given the kind of secrets that they knew, they could not quit and go to the front lines and enlist because the logic was if you get captured, and then they find out, you know, when you're a prisoner, then they, you know, interrogate you as a prisoner of war and they learn about this place. That's it. Like, you know, the whole code breaking facility goes down. So it's like the men who worked there were stuck. They could not, with a very few exceptions, ever do anything more active to fight. And that was a real bitter pill for some of them to swallow.
We have a lot of excitement for the audiobook. They're like, this is going to be so great. And it is being released with the book, so in March. Any information about the reader of the audio version is what they want to know.
Yes, I do have Saskia Marleveld, who did my last two books, The Huntress and the Alice Network. She is going to be reading this one as well. And I literally was, you know, emailing her, you know, when I was writing this thing, it's like, I know you're on maternity leave. Is there going to be any way that you can do this book? And she's just like, I will make time to be able to read this book. I can't wait. So yes, she's going to be doing this. And I think she already has finished doing the reading for that. It's fun because she emails me directly now with like, do you pronounce it Osla or Osla? And I'm like, you know, I never thought about that before. How do I do that? And then, you know, we do some reader questions and so forth. And it's fun to be at least minimally a part of that. But I'm so glad she's going to be doing this again because she's such a talented reader.
Very cool.
And I've seen this question come up a few times, Kate. So Vicky Nesting asked, did the Codebreakers live at Bletchley Park or did they go home at night to their own apartments or families?
Well, they were actually billeted around the area with local families. And it was one of those things where in the villages all around, you had people who were, if you had a spare bedroom, it's like you're going to be putting up your contribution to the war is going to be you're going to be putting up a couple of workers at the local Bletchley Park. Oh dear.
They're very excited. They want to know too.
Oh my God, it's like Sissy.
Oh,
Sissy.
the people love a dog appearance or a couple dogs. Is that I think I heard a couple dogs there, right?
Everybody
Dog
loves
companions.
it's like
Well,
Alyssa Cole's rooster. It's great. You hear them in the background.
Or that horse.
Yeah.
Remember?
We got some pretty famous animals on this door
Yes.
to door.
Yes, we should start a whole new thing called authors animals.
Well, while we're waiting on Kate, should we tell them about a couple things we have coming up next?
Yes, we should. Thank you, Lainey.
Yes.
Go ahead, you do it.
Well, go ahead. Oh, either way.
Well,
So,
next Tuesday for Facebook Live, next Tuesday, we have Russell Banks talking about his forthcoming book, Far Gone, which is amazing. We've been talking about it for forever, I feel. And Nancy Pearl will be with him. They go way back to the days of the very first community-wide read, when Russell's book, The Sweet Hereafter, was the celebrated book out at Seattle Public Library. So anyway, more to come, but please come join us next Tuesday, 2:00, Russell Banks and Nancy Pearl. And now we're back with Kate Quinn and her dogs.
I am so sorry.
Don't
Somebody
not
came to
be.
the door and there was no way to shut them up without actually going there and quickly swatting a few bums and then bringing them back here. Here's the dog. He's very sorry.
What's his
He
name?
Oh.
interrupt the podcast. He's
What's
very
his name?
His name is Miles, and you can't see him, but he's a tripod. He's missing a back leg.
Oh.
But he's here to come now, and he is sorry. Anyway, I was answering a question because somebody refreshed my memory what it was before the dogs
I don't know.
contribute.
it was about
Yeah.
going home at night with.
Yes.
Oh,
Right.
yes.
Nice, Lainey.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yes, the Bletchley Park workers were billeted in the area all the way around. And it was one of those situations where if you lived in a neighboring village, you'd be told, and you had a spare bedroom, you'd be told, okay, you're going to be putting up a room and board for someone who's working at Bletchley Park, and you are not allowed to ask them what they do for a living. And so therefore the local people would, you get a couple of girls or a couple of guys who would be working at the park, and you would put up with some really weird work schedules because the park worked 24/7. So they might be working the 9 to 4 shift. They might be working the 4 to midnight shift, or they might be working the midnight to 8 shift. And that was one of those things where you didn't question the fact that you had somebody coming and going from your place at all times. And you would just, leave a meal out for them, and they'd come and go, and that's what would happen. And you had buses that ran through the whole area to pick people up and deliver them to the park in time for their shift. And that's actually how my girls actually all get to know each other. Girls, I keep calling them girls. They're grown women, obviously. But that's how my ladies get to know each other, because the two who are recruited to the park at first come to the household where there is a local daughter at home. And they're the ones who realize she has a horrible life as the at-home dog's body. She could honestly use a job. So they pull some strings and they get her recruited to the park, where she finally is able to sort of spread her wings. But that's how they all get to know each other, is because 2 of the women are billeted in the third woman's home. And that is how they all get to become friends. But yes, the billet system was really quite a remarkable thing as well, just as far as you had people who were working at the park, these insane hours, and then they were living away from home as well. And they were sometimes not able to see their families for quite some time because you had very little time off.
Okay. I think let's see. I think we probably have time for one more. A couple of folks have been asking, no rest for the weary. What are you working on next?
I can tell this is going to be something that the librarians will like to hear.
Uh-oh.
Because what I'm working on next is another World War II story. And it is about a real historic woman, whose nickname was Lady Death, which is really the coolest nickname of all time. And the thing was, she was an ordinary Russian girl who was working in Odessa as a library research assistant. In 1941, she was a single mother, a historian, a graduate student. She was working on her dissertation on the world's most boring topic. It was all about like Bogdan Khmelnytsky and the Pereyaslav Council. And she's working as a library research assistant, very much, like the mild-mannered librarian type. And that is when she gets the news that her country has been invaded by Nazi Germany. And so because it's Russia and women are actually allowed to fight in the army and the navy and so forth, she up and joins the Red Army. She becomes a sniper, and she ends up becoming the most deadly female sniper in history, with a count of 309 dead Nazis to her tally. And not only that is, because really the whole idea of like the mild-mannered librarian who becomes the world's most deadly female sniper is not good enough. She also goes on a goodwill tour of the United States in 1942 and becomes BFFs with none other than Eleanor Roosevelt. So this is the kind of story I can't believe has not been made into a historical novel before. But this particular woman's name was Lyudmila Pavlichenko, nickname of Lady Death. I urge you to Google her. And so far I'm about maybe 35,000 words in. And so far the book has the working title of The Diamond Eye.
So cool.
We're going to have a lot of fun with that one.
I'm having a lot of fun with that already. I can't wait.
Yeah, no, that sounds absolutely fascinating. Kate, we could talk to you all afternoon. This has been so great. It's been so great to see you and have you, engage with us and our librarian friends to talk about this new book, which is just so fascinating. And again, to shine a light on these women, untold heroes, really. I just want to read this quick quote because we do have to wrap up, but there's a wonderful quote here by Beatrice Williams, New York Times bestselling author. She says, the hidden history of Bletchley Park has been waiting for a master storyteller like Kate Quinn to bring it to life. The Rose Code effortlessly evokes the frantic, nervy, exuberant world of the Enigma codebreakers through the eyes of three extraordinary women who work in tireless secrecy to defeat the Nazis. Quinn's meticulous research and impeccable characterization shine through this gripping and beautifully executed novel. Once again, you have delivered a completely powerful, informative, entertaining, and compelling read with this book, The Rose Code, going on sale March 9th. So Library Reads, get your votes in by Feb 1. And what else do we want to say? Is there anything? I don't want to forget anything. We do have a library hardcover edition. Of course, this is perfect for book clubs. Is there anything else that we want to say? I don't want to forget anything. Chris, Lainey, Kate, are we good? Have we mentioned everything we want to? And if there are any questions that have come in or are still coming in, Kate has offered to answer them on Facebook. So if anybody didn't get their question answered, you will. And again, if anybody wants Kate to come to their library, send an email to us and we'll get it to her publicist. And I think we're good.
Yeah, I just want a quick reminder of some things coming up. So this Friday, Instagram takeover, Sam Miller, who was on our door-to-door, you can go watch that. He's going to take over all day on Harper Library. And then tomorrow, we're live again for another book buzz with the Hartford Public Library. So all of this information's on our Facebook page and you can sign up, and it's about gift books. So we're very excited. Just letting you guys know. Yeah,
that's going to be fun because we're talking about books that we love, books that'll be good gifts for you to buy for people, but books that'll be good gifts for you to get yourself, because we all come first. Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much for taking the time. And we went a little bit over. I hope everybody's okay with that. They're all still here, so I'm guessing that they are.
No, thank you so much for having me. And librarians everywhere, it was such a treat to talk to you, and I could do it all day, to be honest. Thank you for the giving me the allowance for the canine interruption. He sends his apologies. So yeah, it's a lovely way to break the day on the routine and quarantine. So thank you again for having me.
Wow, thank you. You take care, be well, happy holidays, and we'll be in touch again soon.
All right, well, you have a lovely day, and everybody go home and read something fun, because that's how we're all going to stay sane while we're in quarantine.
Wait, one more thing. I want to mention your website, Kate. You have wonderful reading recommendations there. If you want to travel the world, but you can't, you offer up some wonderful reading suggestions. Reading in quarantine, I suggest you go to Kate Quinn's website. There's terrific suggestions there in her blog post. So I just want to make sure to get that in there. Okay.
Oh, wonderful. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. Well, take good care, Kate. Librarians, thank you so much for joining. And we'll be back. Don't forget, next Tuesday, Russell Banks, Nancy Pearl in conversation with us. And Lainey, one more time about our book buzz.
Mm-hmm. Tomorrow, it will be on the Hartford Public Library page, but we're sharing it on ours. So Library Love Fest on Facebook, all about gifts for everyone on your list, including you. So,
all right, you take good care, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you again. Thanks, Bev. Mwah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye, Kate.